2022 to 2023, big dip
Yeah.
in the number of homicides. So let's start there. What went into that? What did you guys see?
Yeah, so we saw a significant reduction in our overall violence here and crime in the city, and specifically our gun violence. We had in 2022, we had 23 homicides. Last year, we only had 8. I will tell you, we had about a 75% reduction in firearms homicides, firearm-related homicides. So that has been huge. So last year we only had 5. When you look at our non-fatal shootings, I have to reference this number. No, you're good. Yeah. So our non-fatals shootings, we had a 57% reduction, which is incredible. And then when you look at our shots fired incidents, so we kind of classify these differently. So fatal obviously is a homicide. A non-fatal is where a victim was struck but then survived. And then we'd have shots fired. That's what we label them internally. And so that's just where we respond out. We have evidence that there was a shots fired. It could have been into the air, could have been into a building, could have been towards somebody. We don't know, right? We may not know. So we had a 50% reduction just in our shots fired. And so another thing that we track in terms of who does our shootings is whether they are group member involved. As you may be aware, we participate or we live by the philosophy of group violence. And so we saw a 75% reduction in our group members, the ones that we don't call them gangs, we call them groups. So we saw a 75% reduction in the number of group members that are out there shooting. And that's very telling for us because it tells us, at least tells me, that what we're doing with GVI is working. We have our project manager, Tiff Flo, and her team out there hitting the streets, letting these individuals know to put your guns down, that the shooting's not going to be tolerated. And then if they don't listen to us, we're going to release the law enforcement, take law enforcement action. And so we're just so proud of that number. That it seems that our message is being received. So I'm just incredibly proud of the work that we've done here, our police officers, the community members who stepped up and said, we're not going to stand for this violence, and it was a great year.
And I also wanted to talk about some of those initiatives. Obviously, there's GVI that got a lot of publicity. There's also, and I think we did a story on it, I think I might have been the guy to do it.
Yeah.
We did the story on neighborhood policing units, going back to that, what I believe Mulder called old school style, where you're hitting specific neighborhoods. How did that impact?
Yeah, I mean, so we're still working through that. It certainly has its effects. We're looking to build upon that here in 2024, and the idea behind that is that various communities have one officer that's kind of designated to their specific area, and they really will work closely with those community members to say, what's truly troubling you? What is going on in your neighborhood? And then not just addressing those symptoms, but really diving deep into the root causes to pull that root out, right? And make sure that we're not just constantly responding for the same thing, that we're actually addressing the root cause.
So I wanted to ask then, anecdotally, we have the data that shows things got better, 2022, 2023. Would you say community relations also improved in that time?
Absolutely. I would say so. Our citizen complaints have been down. I think the trust that the community members have in our officers is phenomenal. The one thing that we started last year was victim surveys. And so when you're a victim of a crime, you'll get a text message to fill out a survey to kind of rate us, right? Like, how are we doing as a police department? How are officers doing as in their response and their professionalism in explaining that procedural justice, like explaining the process? And overwhelmingly, it has been positive. There are some negatives, which is okay, because it allows us to find out what exactly happened, and we can take the necessary actions internally to make sure that doesn't happen again. So we can't fix things that we don't know are broken, and we're not going to be perfect all the time. So it's great to take that feedback, and I just want to thank the community for actually filling out these surveys, because we review every single one of them Every morning I have a survey. I have a series of surveys in my inbox, and I review those and I make sure our lieutenants are following up on them. So it is great.
So 2024, I think last year we talked about new staffing was on the way. There was additional external funding that was helping.
Yeah.
And then changes were made that could give the department more officers on a more consistent basis.
Mm-hmm.
What I wanted to ask, because we talked about it, there were going to be more officers at the end of last year.
Yeah.
Did we get those? Are they on the street yet?
So we did hire some last year. We actually just swore in 3 on Tuesday. And what the community and the media too needs to realize is that for us, a new officer isn't really realized on the street for about 10 months. They have to go to a 6-month academy. We have a 4-month field training program where they're paired up with an officer before we will release them to police on their own, right? They need to learn this job before we will trust them enough to go out and do it themselves. So from the time that we hire somebody, it's nearly a year before they're realized. So we're currently sitting at 108 officers. Now that's not our full operational strength right now, because we do have people still in the academy or still on field training. But yeah, we're getting stronger and stronger. It seems like every day.
And I was going to say the plan is to get the additional detectives as well, all those
Absolutely.
positions?
Absolutely, yep. We want to really expand our community policing. We had to backfill some in the detectives. So yeah, it's bringing on these extra officers has allowed us to be a little bit more creative with some of our different things, right? We have 3 therapy dogs now, so you need to have handlers for those, and so the extra officers certainly has allowed us to be more strategic in how we interact with our community members.
And the one thing I really wanted to know is what are some of these things that we can expect that we didn't see in 2023, or that might have been kind of behind the scenes things that are hopefully going to keep this progress going into 2024.
Yeah, so we're working on some more credible messengers for our GVI program, not a program, but our strategy, and they're going to be out there, touching and interacting with these group members and those at risk, and then also a trauma responder. And so our vision behind that is, when we have shots fired or shootings, just because you weren't the actual victim, that sustained that gunshot wound, right, doesn't mean you weren't impacted by that incident. And so this individual will go out and they'll work with those in those affected areas and help and try to get them the help that they need, because it is a traumatic incident. If a shooting happens right outside of your house, that can be very traumatic. And so, we're excited about that moving into 2024.
And is there anything else as it pertains to, the really good year last year, what we hope for this year that we didn't touch on that you think the people of York should know?
Just know that as long as the Commissioner Muldrow and myself are in our positions, that we're never satisfied. We had a great year, but we won't be satisfied until we can make it through a whole year where we don't have anybody that is affected by our gun violence specifically and violence in general.